So you started as a professional singer. You were even touring with the likes of Zendaya and others.
Nobody else knows how prepared or not prepared you are. Some of it just has to do with I actually learned a lot of the choreography and the music during that rehearsal because I was just listening and copying the people around me.
Challenge your imposter syndrome by reminding yourself that they hired you. The same people that you're afraid of and that you want to impress are stupid, because that's what you're implying if you say that you feel like you're not worthy of the job. So you started as a professional singer, and you were even touring with the likes of Zendaya and others. What parts of that particular life shaped the leader that you are today? And I want to kind of press that a little bit more and just kind of what parts of that life help to form the pedagogy that you carry with you as a leader in tech today?
Yeah. So, that time of my life was wild, I will say.
Yeah.
It feels like a different life, like a different lifetime. So that was when I was at Oakland School for the Arts for middle school and high school. So Zendaya was a classmate of mine before she got famous. She was a normal girl. Beautiful, talented, normal girl, looked like a supermodel. She was a sweetheart, absolutely,
Okay,
and she is to this day. She's remained very sort of grounded and humble. But she was just a classmate of mine, and I remember she sort of disappeared for a while, got on her Disney show, and then came back when she launched her first album or released her album. I say launched like it's a startup. See where my mind has gone over the last few years. But she wanted to have young people on tour with her, because usually when they're building these Disney tours, it's like, a child is the star, but then there's a bunch of professional adult musicians and dancers and whatnot.
Sure.
And she wanted to maintain, her community and her friends around her, which I think is part of the reason she stayed grounded and humble, right?
And that's smart, because they're like, you're going to go away, you're not going to be the same when you get back. It's like, nah, come with me, and I'm going to have my parent convince your parent.
Right. And I feel like that's also why so many of the child stars end up being, addicted to drugs and get in trouble, because they've got adults around them from a really young age. That, isn't good for kids. They should have kids. Anyways, so she came back and recruited some of the band and backup dancers and singers, including myself. And so then we toured around North America for a year and a half, 2 years. And it was pretty much we were all in school Monday through Friday. Friday night, we'd fly out to some random city in the US and then perform Saturday, fly back Sunday, go to school Monday, every weekend. And then over the summers, I was living at her house. I lived in I quite literally slept in her shoe closet, for 2 months over the summer while we were prepping for tour.
Yeah.
It was a really wild time.
Yeah.
But very formative indeed. And I think, besides stage presence, which I feel like is sort of the obvious thing that has transitioned into my current work, being comfortable on stage. And, if you can sing to an audience of 100,000 people, that's dramatic. It's not 100,000, maybe 50,000 max, which is still a pretty big stadium.
After a certain thousand, it feels like they're all the same.
After it literally does.
20,000, it's like, that's 100,000.
When you're
I can't see back there, so.
When you're a teenager on stage and you're tiny and you look out to we were at, Oracle Arena, for example.
Oh my God.
It feels like there are millions of people there. I don't know. But to be able to do that and then to get up and pitch to a room of 50 investors feels pretty easy at this point, you know what I mean? So that is a very, clear transferable kind of skill and experience. But the other one that I was thinking about earlier when I read this question was, after all of our shows with Zendaya, we would go out and do meet and greets. So all of mainly little kids, right, are her fans, because it's a Disney tour. So it's little kids and their moms, and they were waiting to get Zendaya's autograph, and they'd come and we'd all sign autographs and chat with them. And many of them, this was just such a highlight of their week, month, year, whatever, to just be I would love to do what you're doing when I grow up. It's so cool. My dog died this week, and this was the thing I've been looking forward to. And the mom is telling us she practiced all the dance moves, really kind of, confiding in us or being vulnerable and sharing their story. And of course, I'll never see this kid again, but to them, this is sort of a memorable experience. And to really learn that skill of meeting strangers and listening and locking in and giving them that attention, that making them feel special. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's something that I think not a lot of young people especially, but even adults really ever learn to do.
Yeah.
And I also use that a lot in my job currently, right? Especially being with TechCrunch, there's a lot of founders that want to come up and pitch, and they're dedicating their lives to building this company. Let me tell you about it. And that is a big moment for them to pitch to TechCrunch their idea, right? Where I've heard 100 pitches today. I'm like, okay, lock in. Okay, what are you saying? Tell me. And to really to focus like that, and also context shift between people. So I don't know, it's kind of a unique experience that I never thought I would have again post meet and greets with Zendaya, but is now coming back to be something I'm glad I know how to do now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, that's so interesting too, because I feel like you said a lot there as far as how it shaped, impacted, sort of prepared you for other moments in your life, which is there's this element of being present.
I think it's even a step further than that. And it's sort of, you're a performer, but it becomes part of who you are and it becomes your identity, right? So like in that moment, I'm representing Zendaya and I'm signing meet and greet, right? Like this is my job to be doing this. But also if I were to be like, you know, walking around the parking lot after and a kid was like, oh, I saw you on stage, like you are still in that role, you know what I mean? And similarly with my current job, like, you know, it is not just like the hat that you wear when you're on stage or even backstage. Like it kind of becomes who you are. You are embodying that brand and it also becomes interesting when you're paid to do that, right? Because now it is like you are a living, walking, breathing representation of this brand. Yeah. And I think about that sometimes with my current job at TechCrunch, right? Like, you know, I would never do such a thing, but say I wanted to like post a picture of me and my girls like wasted on my Instagram or something, but like everything else is TechCrunch content. Like that would be kind of not great for the brand. Like, you know, things like that where like they trust you and who you are, that you're not going to like, you know, ruin the brand with something you do publicly. So it's this interesting thing where like that is now a me thing and not necessarily just a job thing. And that's become kind of a weird transition or weird realization. I think even back in the Disney Zendaya days, like we used to joke about this because they would say like, you need to be Disney friendly. And like we were, you know, a bunch of teenagers who would be like, we're very Disney, but we're not so friendly. And like we'd make kind of like innuendos about that and it became like a running joke. But it's true that, you know, you have to embody that at all times or else you will get fired, but also ruin some of the brand image, brand reputation.
What do you think is the connection there? Because it was surface and now it's almost like when people think about Isabelle, this is what they think about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it becomes a skill. It's something that you can turn on and off, right? But I think the ethos of it, of giving people the time of day, that sounds weird to say, but like anyone you meet on the street, right, is worthy of a conversation. It's a little bit of that, where I think a lot of people kind of brush past people and be like, I don't have time, I'm busy, I can't deal with this right now, like that sort of mentality, especially the more busy and whatever, you know, higher up you get. But to kind of maintain that, like, we're going to talk to everybody and look them in the eyes and ask them questions about their life. You know what I mean? Even if I actually don't have time for this, like, you know, that's important because they wanted to talk to me for some reason, right? And I'll hear them out. So I think it's a little bit of that. I think the other thing to note is like, you know, a personal brand versus a company brand, right? That like Zendaya obviously has to maintain her personal brand and her own image. Influencers, same thing. In my experience, like I've sort of just recently budding a personal brand, I guess. But for the most part, I was representing Zendaya's brand or representing the TechCrunch brand. And that's a different type of sort of duty, I guess, where I've been lucky enough to work for companies and organizations that I believe in, right? So I'm happy to represent this brand and they trust me to be a public representation of it. It's a little different, I think, when you work for a company, you're still representing the brand, but you may not be like publicly speaking on behalf of them in the media or, you know, like going to events as the representative. But then the personal brand part, I think, is interesting because, of course, then you can tie more of this stuff to get into it where, you know, like I want my personal brand to follow that ethos where, yes, I also want to talk to everyone that I can and learn from people and have those conversations. I don't want to brush people off. But then, you know, all the other kind of elements of building a personal brand, that's a whole conversation I feel like we could get into. I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole, but
and we will touch on it a little bit. But first, I want to, before kind of moving on to other topics, I want to talk about what you shared with me from when you were working with Zendaya, and there was one particular, was it a audition that her father had spoke to you? Can you tell me about that story? Because what you said there, I think actually very much ties into what we're talking about now.
Yeah. So it was my very first day on the job. Basically, the rest of the tour, the band and everyone else had already done a few shows and they needed to replace a backup singer. So I was brought in a little bit later. So this was my first rehearsal, but everyone else knew the music and the choreography. And there were a couple Disney executives coming in to rehearsal that day to sign off on the tour because they have to approve it. And I didn't know any of the music. I mean, I had listened to the song, so I at least could kind of like fake it, but I didn't know it. I didn't know my part in the harmony. I didn't know choreography. And her dad, who was also her manager at the time, kind of pulled me aside and said, listen, we know you don't know this, but the Disney executives are here. You need to fake it till you make it today. Like, you know, figure it out, lip sync, do what you got to do, but like put on a show and fake it. And of course, my 16-year-old self was probably shitting myself. I was like, are you kidding me? This is the biggest moment of my life and I'm going to pretend. But I did. I mean, I could mouth the words. I made up harmonies where I heard them to be right. And I could like see the other backup singers in my peripheral and I was kind of like copying the choreography. And so we did. And they ended up signing off on it. But I don't know how much it would have impacted if I screwed up, because I think they could easily say this child it's her first day. What are you going to do? But that taught me a lot, right? That has stuck with me for many years, because in the most pressurized situation of my life thus far, I was supposed to just jump in cold turkey and was expected to do that. And I mean, I probably went to the bathroom and cried before they actually came in. I'm sure I panicked, but ended up doing it, right? And they couldn't tell. And so I think that has stuck with me, because it sort of taught me that, nobody else knows how prepared or not prepared you are. And some of it just has to do with I actually learned a lot of the choreography and the music during that rehearsal, because I was just like listening and copying the people around me. And so by the time the next rehearsal, I was probably like 10 steps ahead if I had actually started, rehearsing from scratch.
And so, having that hesitation.
Exactly. And like the pressure of having them there, I was all lit up and animated as you should be on stage, where normally in a rehearsal, you're kind of like, yeah, what now? What? So I think it actually worked out. And yeah, no, it's a lesson that I will not soon forget.
That's so wonderful, because I love this, because obviously the show is about Proverbs, about wisdom, and the way that you said that's kind of followed you throughout life. And it's something that people have heard of before, right? Fake it till you make it. A lot of times the connotation is like you're almost you're almost cheating or something, right? But the way that you talk about it is, it's very almost empowering. It reminds me of when, some parents, as a part of teaching a child, a baby, how to swim, they'll just kind of like, just put it in the water.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously they're being, careful, but one thing that people don't know is that babies actually have the ability to kind of stop water from going back. Like really like newborn babies have this ability that's like part of their like breathing system that like actually stops fluid from going too far back, which is actually something that they had from the womb. As you get older, it goes away. But that's why they say, hey, use like this time while you're, have a newborn to teach them how to swim. Just put them in the water, right? The thing that you actually think that could happen or can, but is less likely to, because they're actually already prepared for success. They have something out of the womb that you don't have that actually makes this moment even more of a higher rate of success than you would think. So back to your story of like already being prepared for success, right? It's not easy to get into the door, like get into the room. And a lot of times when we get into the room, we think, okay, now I have to do this next big thing where it's like, it's already hard. No, people are very protective of their time. A lot of times, if you get into the room, I'm not saying like kick your feet up, but realize that there's a certain level of acknowledgement already, right? Same thing for when I challenge people with imposter syndrome. I'm not saying you don't have imposter syndrome. I'm just saying challenge your imposter syndrome by reminding yourself that they hired you.
Yeah.
So what? They're stupid? The same people that you're afraid of and that you want to impress are stupid, because that's what you're implying if you say that, you feel like you're not worthy of the job. So anyways, I can go on and on about the fake it till you make it, like in more of a positive sense, rather than what people can think of as like, oh, you're fraudulent. Yeah. Right? Rather than actually, I'm more prepared for success just because of the fact that this is an option I have, rather than those people who are not even in the room.
No, exactly. And I totally agree that once you're in the room, you've almost made it, right? You just need to kind of keep up at that point.
Yes.
But I don't necessarily see fake it till you make it as like being disingenuous or kind of being fraudulent. I'm sure that can be a twist on the proverb for sure. But I think the way I see it, at least, is more about, I think there are a lot of, especially young women who wait until something is perfect, right? And to put it into the universe. So ideally, I would have waited, if I had any control over the situation, until I knew every single move in line before the Disney execs came in, right? Then I'd be like, I'm ready to show this to the bosses. But like, that's not life. You can't wait until that happens. And I think I see this a lot with founders too, right? That, they'll be building a product and, maybe wait until when. There's never the perfect time. But at some point, maybe they have this magic idea that it will be ready to be launched. That time never really comes. That's the secret. But the idea of fake it till you make it being putting together an MVP, right? It was, as we say in startup world, but a minimum viable product, and just putting it into the world. Rough, scrappy, and starting to iterate and get feedback and build from there, rather than trying to like be protective and gatekeep it to yourself until it's ready. And so that's sort of how I view it now, right? If there's an idea that you have, just try it, build it, fake it till you make it. And then at some point you will have made it and it will be a real product and it will have customers, right? But that requires you kind of jumping off the ledge a little bit and taking a chance on your idea or your product or whatever it is. And so that's sort of where it motivates me a bit, right? It's like, you want me to do what now? All right, I'll fake it till I make it. And it's not that I'm impersonating someone or doing anything fraudulent, but it's just that I need to put on a little bit of my own mental hat and being like, I don't know how to do this, but I will figure it out. And if I have to fake it a little bit and, do some dance moves that I don't actually know, then that's what I'm going to do until they believe that I'm Zendaya's backup singer.
So I want to jump into a little bit about your role at TechCrunch. And so you run the Battlefield program, and you do events around, like specific events around like the journalism. I want you to kind of tell me a little bit, like one more time, because like I'm not as good with like repeating that.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me a little bit about that first before we jump into a question.
So I run the Startup Battlefield program at TechCrunch, which is our early stage startup launch competition. So every year we pick the 200 most disruptive, cutting-edge, early-stage companies from around the world across all industries. And we feature them at TechCrunch Disrupt, our flagship conference here in San Francisco. And so basically those 200 companies are exhibiting and pitching throughout the conference. Investors and corporates from around the world come to see what TechCrunch has coined as the next wave of innovation, this year's best in show, if you will, of innovation. And then we pick the top 20 of those 200 who get up on the main stage and they do a longer pitch, they live demo, which is always interesting. We've had big name alumni like Dropbox whose demos failed live on our stage and yet they become Dropbox. So it clearly worked out fine anyways for them, but always interesting. And then we have, top tier Silicon Valley investors who are doing Q&A on stage with them. And then the winner gets $100,000 equity-free prize money and a trophy. And most of them, all of the top 20 and most of the 200 get TechCrunch coverage, right? And are featured in TechCrunch, which for many of them is sort of the golden nugget of this whole thing, because we've heard some wild stories over the years of how a TechCrunch article has really made or broke startups. Yeah. And one story I love in particular, we had a founder who was coming to the US from, I want to say Turkey, but I'm actually not entirely sure, somewhere in sort of like Eastern Europe going into the Middle East. And they were like a robotics company. So they had some kind of robotic arm in their suitcase and they were trying to come through TSA, got stopped, right? So, you can picture the situation. And they were like, what is in your suitcase? All this stuff. And they were trying to tell them, like, I'm a robotics founder and I'm coming to do business here. And they didn't believe them. And they finally showed them the TechCrunch article and TSA was like, oh, okay, all right. And they let them through immediately. And I was like, that's horrific, first of all. But second of all, wow, that's it.
So TechCrunch is the new passport. Yeah. in the tech world, TechCrunch is the passport. Wow, that's really cool. So another thing I wanted to ask you too is like, what has been the most exciting startup idea that you have come across? Exciting for whatever reason. Exciting for the impact that it's going to reach, or exciting for the way that they might utilize tools in a different way, or exciting for whatever. But what has been the most exciting startup sort of project that you have come across maybe in the past couple years?
It is really hard to pick one because we see, anywhere between 2,000 and 4,000 applications a year and then pick 200. So, wow. Of course, there's a winner every year and, those are fantastic companies. And I could just say that those are my favorites and those are the most exciting, but there are also so many other companies that we see. It's really hard to pick favorites because, what are we judging them on? What we are judging them on is quite specific. I would say just generally speaking, there's a lot of really encouraging and inspiring med tech that we've seen. To me, that always gets me personally because it's like, these are people that I get to go have a beer with afterwards and they're, low-key curing cancer or like finding, ways to, make fertility more accessible. Just like amazing, game-changing things for humanity. And like the founders are just like normal, cool young, brilliant people. And that is always shocking to me, because I think we see a lot of, B2B SaaS and AI productivity tools, and like all that's hot in Silicon Valley, right? But like, of course, we do talk about it and the investors love it. So like, it's there and there's a place for that. But, to sit and talk to someone who really is, like last year we had a company who won, Salva Health, who has a portable, low-cost, low-infrastructure breast cancer detection device. And so they have scaled all throughout rural Latin America, and they're able to increase breast cancer screening to places that have never had the ability to screen for breast cancer. I mean, that is, again, amazing for humanity and for that entire region of the world, and broader, they can go global. So, I mean, stuff like that is just like mind-blowing every time I think about it. So yeah, I'll go with that example.
No, I love that. I think, so my partner is in medicine, and she's always talking about like people, asking her, hey, do you think AI is going to take my job? And she's like, no, please actually do take it. Like, I don't want it. Number one. Number two, like there's so much that I think people focus on when it comes to like medicine and technology that can easily be bottlenecked with these really large companies, with these really expensive machines, with these really crazy, like, well, we got to do diagnostics and it's going to be $7 million per MRI machine. Are you kidding me? Right? That like so many people go underserved. Yet problems and diseases are becoming more and more pervasive, ubiquitous, sort of like an epidemic. And the technology to be able to just do some of these frontline, screenings or like these, interventions are not moving fast enough. So it is so good to even just hear you say that, because I feel like sometimes when I don't know that, I feel very doom and gloom.
Yeah.
I feel very doom and gloom. And I feel like one of the lovely things about where you work is there's a lot of stress that comes along with your job, I'm sure. But one of the sort of the positive things I can imagine is you get to see the future of innovation on the faces of those that are making it possible, not just reading it in an article, not just sort of like passively making its way to you. Like this is something that you then can almost kind of like reset and be like, man, politics can be really crazy right now. But you know what? There's this founder that's working really hard on breast cancer, like diagnostics and blah, 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 blah. So it's not all bad, right? And exactly. That is so important, I think, not even just for someone like you or me, but like just from people of the world to just have that other narrative that something's being done about the things that we all care about.
Exactly. And I mean, I think for me, part of it is that, anyone can read in TechCrunch or other news that, this tech exists. Great. Okay. Someone is working on curing breast cancer. That is comforting to everyone. But then to, like you said, take a step back and hear the story of the person who's building the company, right? I mean, the company who won second place at Startup Battlefield this year, right? They're working on curing kidney disease. Mm-hmm. Why? Because him and his entire family have kidney disease and have been affected by it for generations, right? Like that is the motivation that gets him up every morning. He's dedicated his whole education, everything to solving this. Yeah. And like that, there is nothing more inspiring than people who have that kind of fuel and mission inside of them. Yeah. I think that really separates. I mean, in the startup ecosystem, there are so many companies and a lot of it is hocus pocus. A lot of it is repeat ideas. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we see, but there's also some game changers in there, and sifting through it is no easy task, let me tell you. But things like that is what really, I think, get a lot of media and VCs excited, is those sort of like mission to the core, right? The founders who will fight to the death for this cause. Mm-hmm. And that nothing is more inspiring than that.
So glad you brought it up, because you kind of mentioned that like sifting through it is difficult. Intuition plays a role. How do you use your intuition and almost wisdom to find the right, I don't even want to say the right or the truest, but like the founders that you believe are at that the timing is right for them? Because some people, I mean, it might be hocus pocus and you should have never like gone for it, but some other people might just be a little premature. So how do you use your intuition and wisdom to guide you when it comes to selecting those 200 and then those 20?
Yeah. I mean, the thing with venture capital in general, investing, it's pretty much a game of educated guesses. Like we all have the same information to the same data. Like you can figure out if a market's going to be booming in a few years and how much it's growing. Like, I mean, all of that is out there. And so a lot of it comes down to, do you trust this founder will give their all to making this happen, right? Like the idea could be great. The market's big, like all the things are there. but is this the person?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the intuition comes in. And that's where I think you can get a really big leg up as an investor if you have a strong intuition and not necessarily just play on the data. Because I think a lot of the times it is that founder motivation and the spirit that you get from talking to them, right? Because that also, those are the visionaries. They see things that the average person doesn't because they live, eat, sleep, and breathe that problem, right? And I think one of the challenges is working in an industry agnostic program. Like every time I talk to a different founder, you have to completely shift gears, right? It's a health tech and now it's a fintech and now it's a climate tech. And like you have to kind of deep dive into each of these different topics. And so there's no way I can know anything or nearly anything about each of those topics. But the way the founder sort of articulates themselves and picks which data points to present and leans into which sort of areas of the problem they've decided to tackle and how, like, it's sort of their unique thought leadership and vision of the problem and solution is often where that intuition comes in. Because you can kind of sniff out if they're in it for the money or if they're in it because this is genuinely the best solution to the problem, or is it the most profitable solution to the problem, you know? And I'm sure there's, you know, middle ground, which is where investors would like to play. But there's also some that are, you know, in it because they want the clout of being a successful founder. There's millions involved, billions if you're good at it, right? And I mean, there's sort of a new celebritydom around being a founder. And I think there are still people out there who get into this world for those reasons, right? And that's where the intuition comes, is being able to sniff out those types.
How is TechCrunch, or even just your role at TechCrunch, how are you challenging that reality?
Yeah, great question. And I think we have a very unique position in Startup Battlefield at TechCrunch that the rest of the startup ecosystem doesn't necessarily have. Whereas we're not actually investing in companies, so we're not writing checks. There's no equity exchange. We are picking an editorial list of 200 companies that we believe in are going to be, you know, game-changing and high potential. And that can kind of be a different like pool of companies than what you see getting funded by Sequoia and Andreessen, right? Like that is a different game. And I can go into a whole spiel about that. But basically the VC ecosystem these days, they're investing fewer and fewer dollars into fewer companies. But I said that sort of wrong. They're writing big fat checks to very few amount of companies, right? And so that profile is looking very copy paste. There is the same type of founder. They're usually repeat founders. They're probably Stanford dropouts. You know the type, right? Like there's an archetype that's being invested in right now. And that does not include Black people. That does not include women. Like you said, like the list goes on. It is very, very sort of specific, which is not great for the tech ecosystem as a whole, right? We're hoping that'll change. It's an economic thing, so we need to kind of like loosen up some of the returns and the exits and the IPOs in the stock market. But I digress. I will go back to the idea that at Startup Battlefield, we can choose exactly who we want to invest in. And our superpower is that we can uplift stories of founders who might be sort of overlooked in the broader VC landscape and tell their stories, right? And that is really what we sort of aim to do, right? Again, those founders who are curing types of cancer, or the founder who won Startup Battlefield this year is a military veteran and nearly lost his life in Afghanistan and now gets up every day with all of the motivation in the world to build this company that is completely redefining logistics in the railroad in the United States. I mean, things like that where, you know, and the VCs might look at it and be like, well, it's the return on investment's not going to come quick enough and this and that, the market's not big enough. But like, we're looking, of course, at some of those things. But what I'm looking at is that this story is absolutely inspirational, right? This makes me want to become a founder. This makes anyone who's ever touched a railroad want to like look at how it can be redefined. I mean, like
so many people like trains.
So many people like trains.
So many people like trains. I had no idea. And it's not just those that like Thomas. They really love trains. Anyways, go back.
You know, there's like a wine tasting train in Napa.
Yes. I went on it.
Go.
The skunk train.
Oh,
yes.
I want to go.
Oh my God. It was so good. It was so fun. It was fun.
But yeah, anyway, so I mean, so we have kind of a unique position that we can uplift stories of people who have stories worth telling. And that's different than most of Silicon Valley, who are writing checks and people who need to get returns for their investors, right? It's a little bit of a different game.
I want to kind of end with a little bit more about culture, wisdom, and your sort of how you want to leave the audience with some wisdom. So first, and I'm not going to pronounce this right. I actually want you to tell me how to say this. I know I'm not going to, and it's not a J. I feel like is it an H?
I kind of want to hear your pronunciation of it.
All right, hold on. Is it like Janteloven?
Yeah, almost.
Okay.
Yeah, Janteloven.
Janteloven.
Yeah.
Okay, so
good one. That was pretty good.
Okay, so when we first talked, you kind of talked about janteloven. It's a cultural rule in Norway, which is where your family is from.
Yep.
That discourages standing out. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about. We talked a little bit about before being in almost two worlds within this city. But now I want to talk about two sort of cultures. How has navigating two cultures, one that says shine, which is like more like Western, is all about the individual, right? And the other one that says, stay humble, right? And is very big on community and history and family. How has that shaped your leadership style, but also just like your personal brand?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've spent many years dwelling on this concept of janteloven because I think when you're bicultural or have two nationalities, right, that the best thing one can do is, pick the strengths from each and leave the rest, right? Because I think they often conflict. And I mean, one parent of mine is Norwegian, one's American. So even in the household, I'd get conflicting advice on these kind of things. But this one in particular always rubbed me a little bit the wrong way because the concept is basically, if you are a star soccer player in Norway, even if you've won all of the national championships, right? If someone says, oh, like, are you good at soccer? You'd be like, no. Like, I've just played a little bit, right? Like, it's that kind of humility, which, don't get me wrong, it is a beautiful trait to be humble. Like, we all want to be humble, but there's another aspect of like not denying your accomplishments, Whereas in the US is sort of the other end of the spectrum where it is just a full competition to see who can scream the loudest of like, I'm special, I'm different, here's my competitive advantage. And I mean, to the roof, right? Which I think both have their faults, absolutely, on the extremes, right? And so of course the simple answer is find somewhere in the middle, right? But I think for me at least, I think that there's a way to be on the American side where you are proud of your accomplishments and you are able to compete in a landscape where you do need to stand out, but without kind of tattooing on your forehead, I'm the best, which I think is what a lot of sort of people end up doing in the US, right? Is how can you either verbally or physically or some kind of stand out, right? Even if it's obnoxious and even if it goes a little bit against like what you feel comfortable doing, but this is what you have to do to compete in such a big country.
Which is why fake it till you make it gets such a negative rep usually, at least where I'm from, where it's like, because people are often doing that, right? Almost acting with like hubris or acting with like ego or acting with something that's not, there's no foundation to what you just said.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Hot air. Like Chicago, I'm from, it's called the Windy City because of all the hot air. Or all the air, really, like all the lies that we tell.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we, but politics, right? So anyways, back to what you were saying.
No, but it's interesting because I think the best way to show that you are different and unique or whatever it is that you're trying to show is by your customers or your people, your community or other people spreading word of mouth of how great your company is or you are as an employee or whatever it is, rather than you saying it yourself, right? That goes much farther. And in Norway, it's interesting because that also carries over where if you were the star soccer athlete and you're like, no, I just play, but then I come in as a friend, I'd be like, no, she's actually phenomenal. Like that is more okay as long as you don't say it, So it's really this idea of like showing your worth and value instead of like saying it or spraying it worse, like that kind of a concept. But I also think there's absolutely merit in being proud of your accomplishments. And I, for one, have sort of taken a slight step from that Norwegian from janteloven because if I've worked hard and put years of my life to work towards something, I don't think there's any shame in being proud of that. But there is a difference between, bragging about it or making others feel weird, some type of way about it, rather than just kind of like standing in it. Like, this is what I've dedicated a couple of years to, and I worked really hard and it went well, or like, I accomplished this. Like, I don't see why that should be frowned upon in any society.
So as you know, the show is called Become a Big Mama. Since we're all kind of becoming something, so long as we're alive, what do you feel that you're currently becoming?
On the personal side, I think I'm trying to become a more well-balanced individual with like a work-life balance. And this year I've been very intentional about getting back into hobbies and spending more time with family and friends because I'm the type of person that can get very blinded by work stuff and I'm passionate about it. I love my job. On the professional side, though, I think I've also kind of gone through a shift this year. I now have my own podcast and am now doing a lot more sort of public speaking and almost thought leadership in the space of startups and investors. And I think where I would love to take this, right, is what we were talking about earlier, how Silicon Valley can be a bubble, right? And it can be this sort of gate-kept community, network of information. I mean, there's so many things that are sort of like you either know or you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And I think what is really powerful is to be able to democratize some of that knowledge and access to some of the network. And I think that I'm currently in a very unique position to be able to do that. Value is what I, at least particularly in the startup battlefield and in sort of the founder-facing arena that I work in, is that, there are founders from all over the world who aspire to come here and raise investment here and come to TechCrunch Disrupt and exhibit. That is sort of the goal for many of them, right? Or as a milestone at least. And to be able to get insights into the journey of founders who've done just that, or the investors who are here investing in companies, right? And just to hear their stories, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be educational, do this, don't do that, or even just news of like, okay, Anthropic's doing this week, but specifically to tell the stories of just like, this is how I built this, and this is where we want to go with it. This was my mission. These were the challenges. This is what I learned, so you don't have to make that mistake. Just candid conversations, and so sort of being able to spread that advice and hopefully encourage more people to create companies, because especially now with the AI wave, I don't want to say it's easier than ever, because it is by no means easy, but it is more accessible to be a tech founder than it has ever been. And I think a lot of people still need guidance on how exactly to do it.
That's awesome. And I feel like if at one point in time I did want to be a founder, and I thought that I was like, well, if I'm not going to be a founder, I'm going to go and be a product manager, because it's kind of like the same thing. Like I'm like running someone else's product, right? I do hope that more people realize that starting a company, starting a business, becoming entrepreneurial minded, engaging with tech is easier now than it ever has been, but they're also less alone than they ever have been, right? With resources and thought leaders such as yourself that can kind of help them get unstuck enough to kind of like you said, go to the next level. Anyways, thank you so much for being on the show. Good luck with your podcast. Also, shout out, what is your podcast name and where people can find you?
My podcast is called Build Mode by TechCrunch, and it is anywhere you can find podcasts. But yeah, thanks for having me. This has been so much fun, and we have to chit-chat again sometime, because I think we literally could talk for hours. We should put that on the calendar.
No, honestly.